Welcome, listeners. Welcome to another edition of SovereignBTC, your guide to the practical side of everyday Bitcoin use. I'm your host, John Bush, and we're reporting this week from Liberty Forum 2014. It's an event that the Free State Project puts on. Of course, the Free State Project is a movement to encourage 20,000 liberty activists to move to the small state of New Hampshire and take part in making the maximum role of government the protection of life, liberty, and property. Every year they have this conference, which is one of the premier liberty conferences in the country. And last year it was descended upon by a whole slew of Bitcoin enthusiasts, among them Roger Ver, Eric Voorhees, and Charlie Shrem. And at that event, they introduced a lot of people to Bitcoin. It's where I was really turned on to the magic, the value of Bitcoin. That really sparked it as a catalyst for me. Jeffrey Tucker as well was in attendance. The Bitcoin crowd took him out to lunch and taught him what Bitcoin's all about, and he hasn't looked back ever since. We got a great program lined up for you folks. We're going to be exploring the vendor area of Liberty Forum, and there's a lot of buzz about Bitcoin. We're going to chat with Davi Barker, Ian Freeman. The guys are here with the Lamasu ATM, a Bitcoin ATM. We chat with the owner of Amaji Metals, Jillian Batty, Mark Edge, a couple other peeps. We had a lot of great conversations about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is benefiting their lives and their businesses. Of course, we're going to be bringing you the Bitcoin tip of the week. Last week, we reported from Freedom Summit 2014 in Phoenix, Arizona. And we were lucky enough to get an interview with Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com, the largest retailer in the world to accept Bitcoin. Really excited about the work that he's doing. And not only is he accepting Bitcoin because it benefits his business, but he believes in Bitcoin. He believes in liberty. We're going to explore those topics in our interview. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hit you with the quote of the week. We caught up with a special guest to bring that to you. So that'll be a nice little surprise towards the end of the program. And we're going to end it all with a nice interview I did with Cody Wilson. He's with Defense Distributed. They created the first 3D printed firearm, and he really shook things up. He was even voted as one of the most dangerous men in the world, dangerous to government. He's really a peaceful guy. And we also chat with him about the new project Dark Wallet, which hopes to anonymize Bitcoin and provide a use for Bitcoin that the man cannot keep tabs on. He's working with a project called Unsystem. Very inspirational guy, Cody Wilson. I'm a big fan of Cody's work. We chat with him about Bitcoin, about the role Bitcoin is playing in undermining and delegitimizing the state, and all sorts of other good stuff. So I want to thank you for tuning into the program. The website is SovereignBTC.com. That's SovereignBTC.com. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SovBTC, or be sure to like us on Facebook at Facebook.com/SovereignBTC. Of course, you can hear this program. You can find it on our website, SovereignBTC.com, or you can find it as part of the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast feed. Lots of great other programs like Mad Money Machine and Ed and Ethan's Bitcoin Report. So definitely check out letstalkbitcoin.com if you want to learn more about what Bitcoin's all about and hear some fine, high-quality programming. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, join me as we take a stroll around the Liberty Forum 2014 vendor area. Chat with everyone about how much they love Bitcoin. Here's Davi Barker, a good friend of mine. He's with Bitcoin Not Bombs. We interviewed him last week on the program. And he also runs his own little Agorist enterprise, Shiny Badges. Tell us about ShinyBadges.com.
ShinyBadges.com is essentially my primary merchandise sort of website. You can go there, you can buy lapel pins, or you can do patches now, or flags, things like that. Essentially, it was my first attempt at going from a W-2 job to a full-time Agorist job, and I knew I had to be providing something people wanted. So it's an Ernieism, you know how he always says, "Where's your shiny badge?" And I said, well, then we got to start selling them shiny badges.
All right.
The joke of the site is that it's about taking state insignia, making fun of it, and then wearing it ourselves to sort of delegitimize or demystify what these symbols mean, right? So if everybody's wearing a badge, then really nobody's wearing a badge.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, just like if we're all on the list, then there is no list. Tell me about some of the Bitcoin lapel pins you have. You got quite the selection there.
Yeah, so the first one was a simple orange Bitcoin, and then it had a black ring around it. It said, "Free the market, free the world." And that was a slogan that I tested on Twitter. That's one of my most commonly retweeted tweets ever. And
nice.
So I knew that it was market tested, it was a slogan people liked,
yes.
And so I made a lapel pin. And since then, there have been Bitcoin outfits that have come to me and said, hey, we want our own lapel pin.
Cool.
So I did a blockchain.info pin, I did a Coinosphere pin, and so there's a lot of, and the Bitcoin Not Bombs pin, of course.
Yeah.
So I have a little Bitcoin package on the site. You can get all 4 for a discount.
That's great. Now, in addition to this business, you also do graphic design. You've helped me out with a lot of great graphics.
That's right.
Really appreciate your work. Tell us about that.
Well, I grew up, my dad was a graphic designer and he worked from home. So while the other kids were playing with crayons, I was playing with Photoshop.
Nice.
So yeah, I've been doing graphic design my whole life. And I did it professionally for a little while. And then when I went freelance, I just, it was my skill set. I knew it was something people needed. I knew it was something, anybody with a message really should make it visually appealing. And that's part of propaganda, right? And so I like to work with clients. And now I get to choose my clients, so I get to work with messages that I also believe in.
That's great. Now tell us finally, why is Bitcoin beneficial for your enterprises?
For my enterprises, well, I don't have to pay PayPal anything, which is nice. I also, it's anonymizing, which is nice. Also, whenever there's a donation drive or a project that I'm soliciting donations from, it means that account is fully transparent to the donors. They can see everything that goes in. They can see everything that goes out. So that's nice. And it's not the dollar. I mean, we're trying to undermine the legitimacy of this monster. How much of a conflict of interest would that be if we were completely dependent on their money?
That's great. True that. Why don't you throw out some websites listeners can check out your work?
Sure. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a fun one. Shiny Badges is my merchandise site. You can also see my writing at dailyanarchist.com. And then I just had a book come out yesterday, Zombie Apocalypse in New Hampshire. It's survivormax.com.
Can we buy that with Bitcoin?
You can buy that with Bitcoin. I got to get it up on the site, but it'll be there.
Alrighty. Thanks, Davi. We're here at the vendor area for Liberty Forum 2014. We're chatting with Neil and Matt. They're here representing Lamasu, which is a Bitcoin ATM. I had the pleasure of using one last year at PorcFest. It's featured in Sovereign Living Episode 4, which is all about Bitcoin. We premiered that here last night, and we're going to chat with them about the Bitcoin ATM and what is on the horizon. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So maybe you could just first start by describing the ATM, what it's like for our radio audience.
Well, Bitcoin Machine is really about exchanging fiat for Bitcoin. It goes in one direction, takes cash and sends Bitcoin to a wallet, and the real awesome part of it is it's a very slick machine. Transaction usually takes about 15 seconds.
Oh, wow. And when did this machine come out?
Good question. I think Zach and Josh came up with a prototype. It's definitely been over a year. I know that they debuted the first machine. Sounds like it was made out of plywood.
Yeah,
Nice.
It was made out of wood. Guts were spilling out the back of it. It was I think there was a Raspberry Pi just dangling out the back. But it was a fantastic machine then, and it's really become so much more polished over time. And as you said, you had the pleasure of using it just last PorcFest, and you found it pretty easy, right?
Yeah, it was really simple and slick. I just popped it was probably $60 with FRNs, which got me a pretty good chunk of Bitcoin back then.
Yeah.
But I just popped it right in and scanned the wallet I had on my iPhone. I still have the blockchain wallet on my iPhone. Snuck it in there, and it was great. So are these being rolled out across the country?
Across the world, actually.
Right on.
In fact, most of our sales are outside of the United States at this point. Although that's starting to pick up a little bit too, as sort of the regulatory environment is starting to take shape. But most of our sales are Europe, Canada, just across the board.
I saw there's one in Albuquerque, New Mexico now.
That's
There is?
correct. Yeah.
Also in South Station in Boston.
Tell us about that.
Do you know more about the operators?
I don't. We don't. I don't know too much about who's doing it.
I think they rented out a kiosk space there in what is it, South Station, right?
South Station.
And I think they take it home with them in the evenings. But it's been fantastic just seeing these come online in America, and we were the Lamasu Bitcoin machine were the first two Bitcoin machines in operation in the United States. So first to market with that, and we even met one of our customers here at the Liberty Forum.
Oh, right on.
Just came up and said, "Oh yeah, I ordered a machine back in January," and started talking about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. So, is there a fee associated with using the machine, or is that up to the owner of the machine to determine?
That is all up to the owner of the machine. We don't make any recurring fees. There's no licensing. We sell just the machine itself. But they can set their own commission rates, either zeroed or whatever they'd like.
Cool.
And that's the incentive for operators, of course, also in spreading Bitcoin and making it more prevalent. So
Right on. And how much does the machine cost?
it's $5,000 per machine, but if you do order in quantity, there are price breaks.
I'll take 2 right now.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thanks for sitting down with me. Really excited about what y'all are doing and excited to see these popping up all over the world.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
We are too.
Came across Ian Freeman. He's a host of Free Talk Live and one of the founders of the Free Keene movement. And they have a bustling Bitcoin economy that's growing there in Keene. They recently launched the Keene Bitcoin Network. Ian, why don't you tell us what's going on in Keene when it comes to Bitcoin?
Well, the Keene Bitcoin Network is on Facebook primarily, but we meet in reality once a week, and it's kind of the purpose of the meetings are to not just socialize with other Bitcoiners, sell and buy Bitcoins, but also talk about the news of the week in Bitcoin and find out how can we bring more businesses on board. If you go to coinmap.org, you can see there's several businesses in the Keene area, Manchester, elsewhere that accept Bitcoin, Austin, of course, as well. But how can we make more people show up on that map and introduce new businesses and also individuals as well? So the first thing we did was we came up with a quarter-page flyer to hand out to folks just wherever and introduce them. That's all it is. It's some of the text from weusecoins.com, basically shrunk down, truncated, simplified, just to kind of tease people in, hey, here's what this is, here's where you can learn more.
Nice.
We're going to we've already approached the pawn shop owner on Main Street to ask him and see if he's interested in getting a Bitcoin ATM set up.
Cool.
Because we had tried to approach a different business about that, but it was a Quarter News, which is accepting Bitcoin. So if you want to go and buy rolling papers or a soda or whatever, you can go into Corner News. And actually, we had a couple guys visiting from Manchester who are new movers, and they'd actually come out. The one guy was going to Robert Mathias. He was purchasing Daryl Perry's car with Bitcoin. So it was the first automobile transaction that has happened in New Hampshire for Bitcoin. So that was exciting. And that same day, we went downtown, kind of took them on a downtown tour. So they went into Corner News, where they were, first of all, excited to just spend Bitcoin in a corner store.
Yeah.
But secondly, Corner News, actually, the owner has silver for sale. So they actually bought silver with Bitcoin at this physical location, which is kind of like all the best of the, both worlds.
Who said you can't buy anything with Bitcoin?
Exactly. So it's, it's slow going. There's actually a store in Marlborough, which is next door to Keene, that is a garden shop, basically. And he says, the owner says he's going to start taking Bitcoin in springtime. So when he reopens his doors, he's ready to accept Bitcoin. And what's the reason why this has happened is the liberty activists in the area, who are the bulk of the Keene Bitcoin network, are the ones who are going to these businesses and kind of getting them set up, holding their hand, getting them set up with Coinbase or BitPay, for instance, giving them the tools that they need, to get that started.
Is it all Liberty people, or are there any crypto anarchists or lefties or anything that come participate?
So since it's a public meeting, the flyer that I showed you earlier does have our meeting time listed on it. So in theory, anyone could show up. Just the other week, I would say we had one of our best meetings, because if it's just the same old crowd showing up, then it's not that great. Yeah. But when somebody new arrives, and of course they have all the newbie Bitcoin questions, in this case it was actually a student reporter. She's like a graduate student in the area, and she's doing some sort of report on Bitcoin.
Nice.
And so she was pretty much completely uninitiated. So she comes in and she arrives there and she starts asking questions, and it was an hour or whatever of just us answering newbie questions, which is always really fun, because then you're really helping somebody come to the ideas.
That's great. Now, you guys in Keene are known for your outreach. You go to the high school and you're just out in the general public.
But yeah.
Since you're a band, I guess. Tell us, you said you recently went onto the college campus with this nifty Bitcoin flyer here.
Yeah.
How was that received?
Pretty good. Basically the strategy is you go during a class change. I've actually been banned from the college campus for handing out stuff previously, but when my attorney sent them a letter, they backed down and reversed the ban. So they knew they shouldn't have done
Power of a letter
that.
from an attorney.
Yeah, they shouldn't have done that. But anyway, still, I just want to get in and get out quickly. So I don't want to go and just talk to people. I don't want to talk to people about Bitcoin. I want to get people aware of it. And so if it's class change time, I can go in there for 5 minutes, with a stack of flyers and be done with the stack of flyers in 5 minutes. The question I was asking was, are you aware of Bitcoin, or have you heard of Bitcoin, as I'm offering them the flyer? And surprisingly, not very many had heard of Bitcoin, probably 10%.
Oh, wow.
So I handed out 30 flyers in 3 minutes, and 3 people had heard of Bitcoin.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, generally it seems like it's a higher number than that. I don't know what you could contribute that to.
And especially among younger people. I expected it would be higher, but I would attribute it to college kids are notoriously apathetic and don't pay any attention to the world around them, even though they, at the same time, claim to be active on things. I've always noticed that there's like this juxtaposition between what college students say and supposedly believe and what they actually do and pay attention to.
The country's business leaders. There you go.
But, maybe it was the first time a lot of them had ever heard of it, and who knows how many of them took that card, went home, and took the 5 minutes to look at weusecoins.com.
Yeah, and keep it up, and pretty soon the number will go to 25%, 50%, just from outreach like that. So before we let you go, share with us how people can get in touch with the Keen Bitcoin Network.
Probably the best way is Facebook. I wish there was other options besides Facebook. We do have something that we're doing here that's brand new in New Hampshire. It's a red mine system that is going to hopefully allow activists to better coordinate doing things, but that's more for people that are already in the network. If you're coming in from the outside, Keen Bitcoin Network on Facebook would be the best way.
Cool. Keep it up.
Thanks, John.
Now we're with Stephen McCaskill of Amagi Metals. They offer a whole assortment of precious metals and coinage, junk silver, and they accept Bitcoin as well. How are you doing today?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm doing very well.
Tell me a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so I bought Amagi Metals in 2010. We have been growing ever since, and we just started offering platinum. We sell precious metals to individuals and institutions around the world. And in 2012, we started accepting our first cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. And now we are accepting a few other cryptocurrencies.
I saw that. Tell us about that. That's big news.
Yeah, so I believe last Friday we started accepting both Litecoin and Dogecoin.
Cool. That's great. So why Litecoin and why Dogecoin?
Yeah, so we want to support other cryptocurrencies. We think it's important for innovation. And Litecoin has a lot of potential, or at least people who are promoting Litecoin say it has a lot of potential. And we also wanted to have a little fun, which is why we started accepting Dogecoin to see how the market reacts, because I think that the market is very interesting and acts in mysterious ways sometimes.
Nice. Yeah, mysterious ways that can pay off. There's a lot of people in the Bitcoin world that I think it's kind of an elitist position, that are real anti-altcoins. What do you say to that?
I think you should be open-minded. There's innovations out there that we're unaware of, and those altcoins could shed some light on those innovations that could improve the world on a marginal level. And Bitcoin can also adopt that innovation into its own protocol. So I think that there should not be Bitcoin elitists. They should welcome competition.
Nice. Now tell me, what's the biggest benefit to your business for accepting Bitcoin?
The biggest benefit to my business, I would say, is having the support of the Liberty community, having the support of the Bitcoin community to promote sound money and get the word out to other people who may not be aware of it. And then the other thing is people can go from a cryptocurrency standpoint. People argue saying, cryptocurrency isn't backed by anything, but you can convert it to gold and silver, so in a sense it is.
Sure. Excellent. I like to tell people it's backed by the elaborate, multi-million-dollar network that is the strongest supercomputer in the world.
Exactly.
There's something there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for chatting with us. Can you give us a website that people can go buy some silver with Bitcoin from you?
Yeah, www.amagimetals.com. That's AMAGI.
Excellent. Thanks for chatting with us.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We came across Jillian Batty. She is the owner of Stateless Sweets. Been selling all sorts of delightful sweets in an agorist fashion, and you've been accepting Bitcoin for quite some time now, huh?
Yeah, I believe over 2 years now.
Awesome, great. So tell me, why does accepting Bitcoin benefit your business?
The customer base is just so much larger because they have this online currency that's so easy to use and transact with. So for me, it's been just bringing in new business, new customers, and easy transactions. And it's amazing.
Do you do a good chunk of your business with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say the past year about 85% of my business has been in Bitcoin.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. What kind of wallets do you use? What kind of software do you use to transact those Bitcoins?
I use BitPay as my payment processor, and so we work from there.
Now, do you hold the Bitcoin or do you cash it out, if you mind sharing?
Well, I have a ratio. BitPay is pretty awesome where they let you cash out part of it, so I'll usually just cash out the postage.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, and then keep the rest. So.
That's great. Can you share a website people can go order sweets from?
Sure, it's www.statelesssweets.com.
Excellent. Thanks for chatting with us.
Thanks.
Came across Mark Edge. He's one of the hosts of Free Talk Live, which is a long-running Liberty talk show syndicated all across the country. Strong listenership. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of people across the country about how they heard about Bitcoin, and a lot of them say they heard about it for the first time on Free Talk Live. How long have you guys been proposing or being proponents of Bitcoin on the show?
Well, first we heard about it in January 2011. What happened was one of our amplifiers, which is the people that belong to our club, where they pay a certain amount a month just to, sort of get extra little perks and help us out and spread the message of liberty. One of our amplifiers said they wanted to have lunch. Now, if an amplifier says they want to have lunch, especially one that's been doing it for several years, we say yes.
Yeah.
And so he came on up to Keene. We had lunch at the Thai place, and he told us it was going to be about an alternative currency. And in January 2011, alternative currencies were kind of things that, although I supported them, I rolled my eyes at a lot because we'd had a whole lot of not success with alternative currencies, and the Liberty Dollar had a few bumps along the way at that point.
Some minor bumps.
Yeah, some minor bumps. And so I'm like, okay, sure, we'll hear about it. So he told us about the magic internet money called Bitcoins. And I was skeptical. I told him I would sell him some ads for them for the podcast, because I figured that would be the audience that would be most likely to be interested in it. And I had a lot of podcast ads, so if he wants to spend his if an amplifier wants basically free ads,
sure.
I'd have worked out a deal with him. Now, he never did, but he did pay his meal to me in Bitcoins. He sent them later after the meal, and so they were 27 cents a piece at the time, and his meal was about $9, $10, and so that's a really great meal for me now. With them at $5.75 today or whatever they're at, and that was Gavin Andreessen.
Right, wow.
The head developer of Bitcoin.
Excellent.
That evening on the show, we talked about Bitcoins, and a listener and an advertiser named Roger Veer heard the show and began to research them. And within a few months, he decided he wanted to begin paying some of his ads in Bitcoins.
Wow.
So we were the first ad venue in the world to take Bitcoins for our product, which is radio ads. And, it's been, obviously we've been proponents ever since, because to me, if Bitcoins are worth $1, then they're worth $1 million, because they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
There have been some websites hacked and some people who've run bad businesses, that's no doubt, and it doesn't help the Bitcoin economy. There's been some governments who've said, they don't like Bitcoin, or they do like Bitcoin, and that doesn't help. But ultimately, for me, when Bitcoins do what they say they're going to do, and they're a lot easier to use on the internet, especially with the CryptoKit wallet, then they're going to beat out credit cards, because every time I have to enter in, I have to buy something on the internet with a credit card, I've got to put in, my billing address and my name and the whole thing, and it's a pain in the butt. Bitcoins are a lot faster, and people are going to go to what's faster, the new, better currency that's faster.
So I remembered it was Stephanie Murphy that said that's where she heard about it. That's where Roger Ver heard about Bitcoin as well?
Yes. Roger Ver is Bitcoin Jesus. I am Bitcoin John the Baptist.
Nice. Wow. So that's great. So, that's quite the multiplier effect there. Hearing about Bitcoin through your show.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And we have almost all of our advertisers take Bitcoins. We take somewhere near 50% of our ad payments in Bitcoins.
Awesome.
We love Bitcoins.
Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's all it's what I want to talk about.
Excellent.
And I'm excited about it. It's what I want to talk about. And we may do one story on Bitcoin a week on Free Talk Live, but since every one of the ads that we do is a live read, and we're saying, and they take Bitcoin. It feels like the show is just the Bitcoin show, because we're talking about them almost every hour because of the ads.
That's how the Liberty Beat, the new service I do, is starting to seem. We have a whole lot of Bitcoin accepting sponsors, and of course we throw out there now accepting Bitcoin,
Yeah.
So it sounds like the Bitcoin Beat. I'm actually launching the Crypto Beat, which is a Bitcoin news service similar to the Liberty Beat. So you guys are still educating people about it? You still have people coming up and asking you about it that haven't heard about it before?
People call and ask questions all the time about Bitcoins. I think that we are, to a large extent, the interface. Free Talk Live is the interface of Liberty, the Liberty community, and sort of the people who aren't. And we're also the interface of the Bitcoin community and the people who aren't. So we're that membrane through which people can pass in order to get to these other worlds. And I'm happy and delighted to be able to help people to do that, and it's what's important to me.
And y'all are on over 100 mainstream radio networks, right, across the country. So you reach a huge audience that probably hasn't heard of Bitcoin before.
We're on 140 FCC licensed stations,
That's great.
And other stations that people put up themselves. Community stations, pirate stations, whatever you want to call a particular one. I think those are just as important. However, they don't really motivate the advertisers in the same way. So 140 is a nice number to say.
Great. What are some of the big objections that you get from people that are first learning about Bitcoin?
First learning about Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Oftentimes the ledger is an issue for liberty-oriented people. They don't like the idea that every transaction is mentioned. Often people, just in basic ignorance, are concerned that Bitcoins can be hacked. They don't even know what hack means, honestly. They just know that there are people on the internet that can do much more than them. And so, it's a concern. And when you can sort of show them that, look, it's been 5 years now, or 6 years, I don't know how long it's been with Bitcoin, but going on that, if somebody was going to hack them, and it came from the cryptography sector, if somebody could hack Bitcoin, they'd have hacked it already. So that tends to settle them down, and they get a little more comfortable. But I think that's the biggest concern for sort of adult, older people. They just don't quite understand the whole internet money thing. But once it becomes ubiquitous, people don't worry about counterfeiting with dollars. That doesn't concern them. So once it becomes ubiquitous, it won't be a problem.
Right on. What's the website for Free Talk Live for people that haven't heard of the show yet?
freetalklive.com.
Excellent. All right, thanks for chatting with us.
Appreciate it.
Well, that was fun. It's always inspirational and exciting to learn from people why they like Bitcoin and how Bitcoin benefits their businesses and their lives. It's what it's really all about. And I'm really enjoying my time here at Liberty Forum 2014. Shout out to the Free State Project for putting this all together. We had the opportunity to screen Sovereign Living Episode 4. It was the world premiere of Episode 4, the Bitcoin episode, which has us at PorcFest last year, learning about Bitcoin, chatting with Dr. Robert Murphy about Austrian economics and subjective theory of value. We also chat with Eric Voorhees, and I get set up with a Bitcoin wallet on my iPhone back in the good old days. We run into George Mandrick and buy some of his food with Bitcoin. And the show was great. It was well attended, and people really enjoyed it. So we're excited to finish up that project and share Sovereign Living Episode 4 with the world. If you want to check out Episode 1, you can go to sovereignliving.tv. That's available for public viewing. Without further ado, folks, this is the practical guide to everyday Bitcoin use. So we're going to hit you with this week's Bitcoin Tip of the Week.
Here's a primer on transaction fees. The blockchain serves as a public ledger where all Bitcoin transactions are recorded in sections called blocks. These transactions are accepted and confirmed on the blockchain by miners. The work miners do helps prevent double spending of Bitcoins and ensures the security of the Bitcoin network. In order to incentivize miners to process your transactions quickly, a small fee of 0.0001 Bitcoins is appreciated for a miner's efforts. These fees are not mandatory, but they are seen as a contribution to the overall durability and resilience of the Bitcoin network. This week's Bitcoin Tip of the Week was brought to you by Blockchain.info, the world's most popular Bitcoin wallet. Simple and secure, blockchain is the easiest way to get started using Bitcoin. To learn more or to create a wallet today, visit Blockchain.info.
I was really excited to get this next interview. Patrick Byrne is an innovator and just really excited about how he's leading the way. It's always more difficult for those trendsetters that step out in front of the competition and lead the charge to innovate and utilize new technologies. And what better technology to utilize for your business than Bitcoin? Patrick Byrne represents, he's the CEO of Overstock.com. They're the largest retail outlet accepting Bitcoin in the world. And as of this reporting, I think they've probably done around $750,000 worth of Bitcoin sales. So that's really exciting. They're doing a lot of great work. We sat down with Patrick at Freedom Summit last week and talked about why he thinks Bitcoin is valuable for his business. We talked about his thoughts on the Bitcoin community, and we talked about liberty. I hope you enjoyed this interview we did with the CEO of Overstock.com, Patrick Byrne. Overstock.com started accepting Bitcoin, which is really exciting, and probably the largest retailer in the country and the world to accept Bitcoin, and we expect this to start having a snowballing effect. It's rather inspirational, so we're going to chat with him today about how he got into Bitcoin and why Bitcoin is beneficial for Overstock.com and what he sees for the future of Bitcoin. So thank you so much for joining us.
John, thanks for having me.
Maybe you could just share with us a little bit about your personal philosophy. I understand you're into Austrian economics as well, and this influenced your Bitcoin adoption.
Well, just in general, I am pro-freedom. I'm a pro-freedom, pro-classical liberalism, including Austrian school. The Bitcoin came along, cryptocurrency I've been keeping my eye on for a couple of years, of which one is Bitcoin. I thought that the federal government might be more aggressive about doing something to stop it, but in November there was a hearing in Washington, and a bunch of officials got up and said, basically, we don't see any reason we can say this is illegal. So you got to follow anti-money laundering laws, which I'm okay with. And so I thought I would actually that Overstock would be accepting it. I figured we'd get around to doing it sometime this coming summer. And I mentioned that in an interview on around December 20th. And there was such global. That story went global.
Yeah.
Oh, Overstock may be accepting it in the second half of the next year. There was so much interest that I got meeting with my dolphin speakers. I call them my propeller heads, the tech guys. Yeah, if you ever notice when tech guys get together, they just speak dolphin to each other. The dolphin speakers studied it for a few days and said, we think we actually get this live in 10 days.
Wow.
I had to put a whole bunch of them in a room, and for like 10 days, slid pizzas under the door, and out of it came, we got integrated with Bitcoin.
That's great. So when did you first hear about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in general?
Probably 2 or 3 years ago, but 20 years ago, I was studying the math that underlies cryptology, which turns out to be what cryptocurrencies are based on. And I found that. And I remember even back then, in a very academic, abstract way, mentions of that you could have forms of currency based on this math. I remember a specific instance, a professor talking about that. And so when I read 2 or 3 years ago that some of the propeller heads were creating it, I thought that was great. And Bitcoin has emerged in a way. There's such a path dependency, I think, in this that people worry about, well, what about other digital currencies? Well, the Bitcoin has gotten such a head start, it'd be hard to see. Any innovation that another currency brings can just be adapted into Bitcoin, and I would imagine they would keep their lead. But even if they don't have Litecoin or what is it called, Dogecoin? If one of those things took off, no reason we wouldn't integrate with them as well.
Why the hell not?
Right.
So why is Bitcoin beneficial for Overstock.com?
Well, it's beneficial because there is a market that isn't being addressed. There are people who want to spend Bitcoin, and we wanted to beat Amazon and eBay in taking it. So people who have Bitcoin come to us. But the other benefit is, that old saying, I think it was Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
If we classical liberals would like to see a return to a world of limited government based on sound money, it isn't enough just to sit on your sofa and talk about it and gripe about it and take out Hayek's book and underline it for the 30th time. You want to do something about it.
That's right.
This is in our case, we're doing something about it by taking it. And those of your listeners out there who want to do something about this situation that they're bemoaning, you can do your part by getting a Bitcoin wallet. Go to BitPay or Coinbase, or do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I recommend people that haven't set up a wallet before to start with blockchain.info, and then for the merchants, of course, I appreciate BitPay and Coinbase. Of course, they have the option to convert the Bitcoin directly to dollars, so you don't have to worry about the volatility. How did that all play into your decision to move into Bitcoin?
That was part of it. We did not want to hold Bitcoin because we're not Yet, well, because we can't use it. First of all, we take money consumers and we buy other toast, for selling some toasters. Then we go back and buy more toasters. We'd interrupt that cycle if we just accumulate Bitcoin. But so we're taking it. It's a small enough number now. We're just converting into dollars. I would imagine you'll see develop some sort of derivatives market somewhere where companies can hedge out of the volatility risk, just like you can hedge out of the euro or out of the yen dollar.
Sure. Now that you guys are accepting Bitcoin, I'm sure you've been you're greatly appreciated by the broader Bitcoin community. What are your thoughts and opinions on the Bitcoin community? I'm a long-term optimist with Bitcoin because, unlike Visa or the central banks, there's not a bunch of activists that are just out there proselytizing Bitcoin and spreading the word. There's a lot of passion behind it. What are your thoughts on the Bitcoin community, and where do you see Bitcoin going in the future?
What I love about it is what I love about it is it doesn't take government to do anything. There's a lot of inertia in government. Government, it's going to take a lot to get them to stop it, and I think it may be getting to the point of no return. And if they did stop it now, they look like Russia and China, a bunch of autocrats. So I don't think they're. And then the nice thing is, it reminds me of somebody told me once. I was always out there. I was fighting for school choice, and somebody whose opinion I trust a lot in the political world told me, stop worrying about changing people's mind, change seats. In other words, you focus on which politicians don't get it, and you don't try to change their minds. You just try to help their opponents. Similarly with Bitcoin, it means we don't have to demonstrate anymore. We don't have to remonstrate with our friends, with the government. We don't have to convince anyone else. We just have to convert as much of our life as we're comfortable, and it should be very small at first. No one should take too much risk, to Bitcoin. And if you do that, well, I think if we do that and the system proves as robust as I think it will be, water will find its own level. People will start the more you can transact in Bitcoin, the more people might start getting paid in Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. And there'll be right now the government has a monopoly due to their legal tender laws and such on money in the United States. Well, this is an alternative that people can choose, doesn't need anyone's permission. And what it will do is reveal if we are right about what the federal government is doing, which is mortgaging our futures and creating this huge bezel, I call it, this huge actuarially unsound pothole in the balance sheet of society, then eventually Bitcoin will cause that to be will cause that to be revealed. That as there is an alternative that people can elect to convert to, you'll gradually reveal the bezel in society.
Right on, cool. Well, I want to thank you for leading by example and doing what you're doing for Bitcoin, and I'm sure Overstock.com is most certainly going to reap the benefits of it. So I want to personally thank you and appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks.
Like your shirt.
Thanks. And now for this week's quote of the week, we found none other than Jeffrey Tucker. And he's going to go ahead and read the quote. It's from Losky, who is heading up the New York State financial regulation effort of Bitcoin. He recently did a Reddit Ask Me Anything, and he had this to say.
We do hope that regulation will create a level of certainty that could incentivize banks to promote and not stifle these innovations.
Now, Jeffrey, I imagine you don't agree with that quote. Let's hear your quote on the same topic of Bitcoin regulation.
Every bit of regulation you add to Bitcoin contributes to the cartelization of the industry. It excludes innovators who can't be capitalized enough to adhere to the regulations, and thereby reduces the level of creativity that we should be seeing in the space.
That's this week's Bitcoin Quote of the Week. Gotta love that Jeffrey Tucker. He's becoming a staple here on the Sovereign BTC program. I'm a big fan of Jeffrey. I like the way he thinks, I like the way he talks, and I like the way he dresses. Thanks a lot, Jeffrey Tucker, for gracing us with your presence once again on the Sovereign BTC program. All right, folks, without further ado, this is our featured interview for the show. We sat down with Cody Wilson. And man, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of Cody. I really support what he's doing, and I appreciate that he's putting some skin in the game. This is a guy that was under fire from the State Department. He's a big thinker. He thinks about things on all sorts of different levels. in all sorts of different spaces. And I'm excited that he's not only utilizing the 3D printing technology to just change the game, really, but now he's into Bitcoin as well. We sat down and chatted with him about his experience with the Liberator and the 3D printing project, and we also sat down and talked with him about Bitcoin, Bitcoin's role in undermining the state, and his thoughts on the future of the Bitcoin movement. Without further ado, folks, this is our featured interview for Sovereign BTC Episode 4 with Cody Wilson. We're here at Freedom Summit 2014 in Phoenix, Arizona, and he just delivered a speech to the crowd, which was very well received. And we're going to be chatting about Dark Wallet and the role that Bitcoin plays in undermining the state and just some of his experiences in general. I know it's been a pretty wild ride these past couple of years. So, Cody, thanks for joining us on the Sovereign BTC podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's good to be here.
So, I guess let's just start by, I always like to ask this to people that I interview. How did you first hear about Bitcoin?
I was studying macroeconomics in college, and somehow I came across smart currencies and then digital currencies, e-gold, all that stuff. I didn't have time to investigate at the time, but I remember Bitcoin, and I remember watching a documentary that talked about Bitcoin. It kind of stuck in my mind, and then a couple years later, when I was trying to do defense distributed, and we got rejected by Indiegogo, I realized we might just get rejected by PayPal because they have a distemper for arms transactions. So I needed some way to accept money. I remembered Cablegate and WikiLeaks, and I started accepting Bitcoin.
Right on. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the Defense Distributed project, because I think 3D printing and Bitcoin have a lot of similarities in their ability to disrupt the status quo and to be used for tools for freedom in large part. Tell us about the Liberator and tell us about the 3D gun printing project you've been working on.
Okay, yeah. I have a company called Defense Distributed, and its primary objective for the last year was developing and then publishing the files related to 3D printing of arms components, and we had some success with this. The AR-15 rifle receiver, the AR-15 and AK-47 magazines, and then ultimately a complete pistol concept with printed springs, printed pins, printed barrel, which didn't rely on metal inserts and was a completely printed pistol, like in those materials that someone with a 3D printing kit might actually have access to. We released all these files to the internet progressively since December 2012, but in May of 2013 we were issued a directed disclosure request by the United States State Department, which for the first time asserted a policy position that the publication of data like this required their prior approval, and that we had not sought that prior approval, and that they would then try to determine if I had violated the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, which is an ex post facto determination, which regardless of their determination, if I'm somehow held in violation, it's an unconstitutional finding.
Sure.
Sorry, now I'm kind of getting into all of it. But I've been embroiled in this big administrative stuff. But not to be deterred, I went ahead and decided to open up a second front while all that was happening with a group of anarchists in Spain and London called Unsystem. We've been working on a Bitcoin project that is called the Dark Wallet.
Right on. Before we get to the Dark Wallet, let's chat a little bit more about your experience in putting out all these files. And I just thought it was so revolutionary and evolutionary, really, in that it's really sticking your thumb out at the man, because there's really nothing they can do now. Once it's out there, the technology's out there, much like Bitcoin's already out there. These files are out there. There's nothing they can do to stop that. How did that feel, knowing that you, in large part, were responsible for putting this technology out there, putting this data out there that can't be reversed? It's out there. It's been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. What's that like?
On May 5th of 2013, I felt something that I'll probably never feel again, which was, I think, an authentic experience of freedom. Wow. And knowing that, we got the goat of the Warfare Welfare State, if for a couple of days.
Got him by the cojones.
And it was worth it.
And what did it feel like to receive those letters? Because that's pretty big deal. You were facing some pretty serious consequences.
I was so conditioned at that point that we were being watched and to hardship, and for people leaving the project or setbacks, that I immediately knew what to do, and I had a list and everything set in place to execute. It was its own defense mechanism, but I immediately got the EFF, the IJ, all these big firms together. We got Alan Guro, the Second Amendment Foundation, and I lawyered the fuck up. And I immediately had all communications directed through my legal team and not to me.
Right on. How did it feel, like, personally, emotionally? Was there fear you were feeling? I'm sure.
Yeah, sure, there was fear. It was weird, too. I was doing an Alex Jones interview, like, when I got the email. I was like, Alex, hold on, wait. I was like trying to read it, I was like, oh wait. So I like, and this is still on YouTube, and so I'm like, Alex, hold on, all the files are going down. He's like, is this exclusive? Is this exclusive? I was like, yes. So yeah, the moment was actually kind of captured, and
wow.
You have to operate at the higher level of like the emotions, how you feel, but you also have to just kind of execute. And I was like, well, they probably expect me tactically to not pull it down because I'm some type of libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled it down, and I had it all pull off our servers. I didn't admit guilt in my email to them. I just said I've received your email, and then I immediately lawyered up and refused to communicate with them until I had a legal team.
Right on. All right, let's switch gears, but it's not really switching gears, to Bitcoin. Maybe you could relate how the 3D printing technology, specifically the 3D printing of firearms and sharing the plans to print these firearms open source, how does that relate to Bitcoin in undermining the state and the state's legitimacy?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really accessible analogies. A lot of people are doing a good job of communicating this to the public, but one that I like to talk about is like the progressive imagination that policy and administration and social objectives and real progress would be achieved through these directives that large companies would help execute if they are progressively administered. And I know that sounds really weird, so to make it concrete, to use the example of guns, the gun control prohibitionist imagination rests on the participation of strong gun companies, which are the primary, if not exclusive, providers of guns to the American public. And these people can be like swayed and controlled, or browbeaten in the public and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we can also rely on them to serialize things. And in fact, the control of production, the control of who has access to things, is done by a collusive relationship between government and corporations.
Mm-hmm.
If the means of production are distributed in the hands of the many, and if the cost of production tumultuously falls, it's like with cultural production. Everyone now has access to the means of cultural production, like personal computers and digital audio and video equipment. Anyone can become a producer. And therefore no one can be controlled. And the same thing, I think the same logic applies to production, maybe if not at the full scale, but it's coming and people could see it with the 3D printer. And the same thing is applied to Bitcoin. You no longer need a kind of central power and central planning to regulate the economy, which was, I think, assumed, especially in the last century of political economy, assumed to be an essential component of economics and economic planning. Now the people themselves have access to this disintermediating distributed technology, which just allows their own economic planning, and no one can be stopped from being an economic planner. That's kind of the analogy.
Now, I agree with you. It's easier to lean in on businesses. They have more to lose. The board of directors will likely vote to comply, or just comply without even a vote. But doesn't the same thing exist with people? And I know it's more decentralized, but there still exists that coercion and the fear along with the people. Do you think actually, let me ask you this. What institutions do you think would be necessary for more people to be able to overcome the fear that lies within the coercion and the threat that the state possesses? Bitcoin's banned. What institutions would help to alleviate the fear and have people just say, you know what, to hell with you, we're going to do this anyway?
Well, Bitcoin was basically banned in China, and the experience there is a little bit instructive. They haven't really developed a strong popular politics, and so they largely abide by that position. I would assume that there is not a realistic situation where Bitcoin could be banned in the United States, but then maybe I'm just naive. My assumption is that when you create many targets, it's a better social situation than if there are a few large targets.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even mean to speak in terms of targeting or negative attacks. I believe that there's an incestuous relationship between the large firm and government, right?
Mm-hmm.
They love the licensing arrangement. They love the regulatory arrangement. They like being a too big to fail fill in the blank, an indispensable part of the progressive, technocratic imagination. I don't know. I think there's a fearless few who are already the kind of advocates and pioneers of Bitcoin, the evangelists who are going ahead full speed. And I'm not sure that, I don't know. I'm not really answering your question. I don't think that these people can't be dissuaded regardless of the program. The bigger problem is a cultural one. Where many people are kind of, Bitcoin just was delivered to us in 2009, and nothing happened before that, and there is no body of thought leading to it, and it's kind of pruned from its anarchist roots or something. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to create an imagined tradition that we're trying to return to. I'm just saying I'm worried of it being so neutralized and so depoliticized that it's not really seen for its full potential.
Right on. So essentially we're writing the history now. We're taking part in and the building of
It's
this.
a game of narratives, and so many people are so willing to be part of Family America. And they want to get investment from venture capitalists. They want to be part of, like, it's their chance to be part of, like, you know, the political and social elite, that they're willing to kind of neuter the story of Bitcoin, the narrative of Bitcoin. When really it's a game. I mean, you have to more forcefully advocate this narrative. So, because it's like Bitcoin interrupted the story of things. Now everyone's rushing in to kind of tell a story which helps us make sense of the moment. The story that's more successful right now is the New York Times. Bitcoin hits the mainstream kind of story where, like, well, we're finding a way to integrate it with this current system of banking. It's not reaching its radical potential.
Well, I guess maybe that'd be a good segue to talk about Dark Wallet. So, can you explain to the listener? There's kind of a misunderstanding out there that Bitcoin, as it is anonymous, which isn't necessarily the case. Can you break down your understanding of Bitcoin as an anonymous tool right now, and then maybe use that to go into the need for tools that anonymize Bitcoin?
I think it's useful, at least when you talk about Bitcoin to, like, a first timer, to go ahead and describe its capacity for anonymity. But the truth is, like, that there's a capacity for pseudonymity, right? An ID is not necessarily associated with an address, but if you're not reusing addresses, you might as well be using your name, and people can go ahead and it's relatively not anonymous. I mean, it's more not anonymous than it is, and worse, the history of all the transactions is permanently preserved electronically for all to kind of investigate forever and ever. So worse than a cash transaction, you know, and not quite anonymous, really. So the idea is, like, if this is like a libertarian, you know, if this is the ideal cash of the libertarian in the digital age, well, like, what steps do we need to go ahead and begin to implement to really achieve that anonymity or to preserve the scarcity? Or, you know what I mean, like the rivalrous, deflationary quality of Bitcoin? Or what else do we need to do to ensure its decentralized aspect? You know, like, this is like often described as the holy trinity of Bitcoin. So I would tell people to be cautious. If you're not taking extreme measures, they're not enough, because if someone wants to know what you've done with your Bitcoin, they're going to find out.
Okay. So y'all launched this project. You said it's called Unsystem. Y'all are working on the Dark Wallet. You had an Indiegogo campaign that was rather successful. Tell us what's Unsystem all about, what other projects you're working on, and then talk a little bit about Dark Wallet. What exactly is Dark Wallet?
Unsystem is like a collaborative effort. There's no specific creed. It's just a bunch of mostly European anarchists and libertarians, Bitcoin miners and software developers who've been in Congress for a couple of years with each other across different hacker spaces and stuff in Europe. And they're involved in agitation and protests and student movements and Occupy for a while as well. But they largely identify under, like, an anarchist, you know, kind of like banner. And really good Bitcoin developers are in Unsystem. Well, I include Amir Taki there. He's got an interesting reputation in the space, but you know, no one can doubt that he knows how to code and stuff. And so we have Pablo Martin, another really good Bitcoin developer, and Vitalik Buterin. These people were thinking of doing a Bitcoin privacy project, and I was in Berlin this summer, and I was like, it's time for us to work together. I have a technique that I think we can get a big American exposure for. I think I know how to package it for you guys, and if you'll let me direct some of it, that would be useful too, just because I want experience directing a software project like that. And we all decided to work together, and it's kind of like, it's fraught with anarchist peril, because there's a multi-signature address, and there's, like, you know, everyone kind of votes on what to do with the money, and things that I don't really, you know, I kind of take a Steve Jobs type philosophy when it comes to my project, you know, like, you do what I fucking say, but hey, you gotta live your principles. So and we're working on developing this software, and we just want it to be open source application. We've got interest from, I probably shouldn't say right now because we're in talks with a couple different groups, but to build it out maybe as an application. But I'm worried about that. One, not just for creep, but I don't want to be, like, interrupted or interdicted by the federal government for something. I want it to be as, like, unimpeachable as possible.
Sure.
You know, just like the original Bitcoin, just release it. What are you gonna fucking do about it? You know? But to have that moment too, you have to have people using it, and to have people use it, you have to have just good software. So who knows? But we already had, I think, a measure of success in that, you know, the project was received with a level of enthusiasm which coincided with a relative decline in the Bitcoin Foundation's reputation. Also right after the Snowden kind of moment, the Snowden disclosures. So there was a real appetite at the moment, and still is, for different software privacy projects, Bitcoin included. It was the right moment to have the project, and we received quite a bit of money, and there should be no reason we can't have something good in the space.
What is dark wallet, and how does it work? How's it intended to work?
Basically, we are relying upon Amir Taki's work with a scheme he calls Libitcoin. It's like a library he's been working on for a couple of years. And then a kind of grab bag of features that we're working with Peter Todd and some other people with, the Hive Wallet guys and stuff. So we want to do a smart implementation of stealth addresses. We want it to be in the browser. We wanted to take a stab at putting it as another layer of how you're doing Bitcoin on the web. And I think our intuition was good because a group out of San Francisco came in called Spare Coins and released a Bitcoin web client, which was really nice and attractive. This group in Canada released a thing called CryptoKit, which has taken off. I saw Jeff Burke was using it. I know a bunch of people in the space are associated with it now as well as taking ownership stakes. So I think that's a really good direction for Bitcoin to move in the browser with additional kind of as a web technology specifically, not just as an internet technology. And so our intention was both to kind of push that envelope, but to also push the privacy and the anonymity envelope if possible with kind of conceived Bitcoin 2.0 techniques and stuff.
What are your main critiques of the Bitcoin Foundation?
My critique is perhaps more reserved than people think. It's really based off if you read Foucault through Kafka, the idea is that of the Bitcoin Foundation, it's a conceit. It's we can participate in the regulatory process, but we can also reserve for ourselves an independence from it. And no, this is the fundamental lesson of the 20th century. You can't actually to participate is to become an indispensable part of it. You render yourself a subject of power by doing
Join the dark side.
Even if it's not intentional, right? You explicate and you write into the tables of power your own subjectification. And that sounds kind of dry and academic, but it's very largely played out in a material way. Perhaps you saw the New York Department of Finance's public hearings, or how the Senate treated Ross Ulbricht at the Silk Road hearings, or Charlie Shrem's arrest, or all of these things. They're not unexpected. And I think there needs to be one of the problems. I explained this at the Bitcoin Expo in London. One of the problems is that Bitcoin libertarians don't have necessarily developed politics. I think Assange agrees with this. There's more of a kind of just naive enthusiasm, which isn't conditioned by philosophy. I'm not saying you have to be a philosopher to run Bitcoin, but we're in a learning curve right now, and a lot of people are on the wrong side of that curve. And the other people, worse, have just totally thrown in the towel and have decided to become the friends of high capital and finance in New York and go along to get along. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think will happen with Bitcoin? I won't even say if, but when these regulations roll out. You think it's going to falter? Do you think it's going to increase in value? And do you think people are still going to be able to do what they want to do using tools like CryptoKit and Dark Wallet and mixing services?
Yeah, there will always be the people that can get around whatever the system is. In fact, the more elaborate the system is, the easier it is to navigate, right? That's the kind of irony of it all. But no, I'm not worried that some fatal shoe will drop and there will be a kind of death knell regulation or something. I don't think it's going that way. I just think that there's an extreme interest in bringing Bitcoin into the stable of tools which already support the financial infrastructure that is, when I think Bitcoin is itself the very interruptive technique of disabling and dismantling the current financial infrastructure. And I don't see enough kind of direct intention on just real zeal for destroying what is. There's really kind of an effort to just participate in what is and get your money. And I get that, you got to get paid, but it's not very romantic. So.
Right on. All right, just a couple more questions. What role do you see Bitcoin specifically playing in undermining the state, delegitimizing the state? And then what can people do that are interested in that end of ending the state, smashing the state, so to speak? I don't like using that terminology, but nonetheless, how does Bitcoin play into that?
Oh man, I hope it's indispensable. The people have a taste of cryptocurrencies now, and what's funny is at first it was even a year ago it was a marginal thing, kind of just still, even though it was gaining some acceptance, just a libertarian kind of plaything. What's still a bit encouraging is just how it's already become accepted as the horizon of available technologies, and if we'll use the word legitimate means of payment. Funny how we all just kind of adapt to that so quickly. I think more of that is possible, and there's just a kind of state of disbelief about it. So many people are just so subscribed to whatever the status quo is. They don't actually believe in the revolutionary potential of the technology. I just really think that you can't even imagine the ways that it can upend things. So my advice is this: hold Bitcoin, stop using credit cards. And it's the standard tax resistant stuff. But if you want to be an activist about it, expatriate. I don't know. I don't have good concrete stuff for other people. I have stuff for myself. There's risks I'm willing to take, but people have to take risks about it now. It's time to be serious about the task ahead. I think Ross Ulbricht was serious. It's time to be serious. Yeah.
Tell us more about your opinion, your thoughts on Ross. You hold him as a hero in high regard.
Yeah, if not a hero, someone who very worthy of our esteem and celebration. And it's just like a goddamn shame. I know a lot of people maybe didn't know him, or he was just marginal in the movement himself. Like, and his the government has to make the case that DPR was Ross Ulbricht, right? And I don't mean to directly talk about him as DPR, but it's just such a shame that a real master like that. I mean, a guy who had like the stones to not run away with people's money. Do you know what I mean? Like, he did it out of like an ethical place. He operated it as like it's just incredible. People like that are like 1 in 10,000, you know, and to have no support, to be alone in jail like that. I know he assumed the risk, and he's comfortable living out the consequences if he's found guilty, but it would help if more libertarians were serious about what they goddamn talk about, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, and a lot of people they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk, or they don't see the value and the consistent application of the philosophy. So I'm really excited and proud to be chatting with you, and for there to be people out there that are doing such things. I think it's really inspirational for people to put some skin in the game, so to speak, rather than just writing papers and being internet warriors.
That's my advice. Put some skin in the game, right? Because God, you act differently when it's your ass, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, plenty of people won't put them, you know. And I'm not trying to like make some moral bluff or something like, you know, you're not for real, you're not serious. But if more people put their skin in the game, things change faster, and the stakes are higher.
It's necessary to change things. You gotta. That's how you move the ball forward.
Their theories have been had, man. There are great theories of the state, theories of power, theories of social change, and authentic politics and everything. Like, there needs to be a love of the doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Ross Ulbricht, you know, he did, and you know, it didn't take much. It took a couple years. He had a fucking empire. You know, I don't mean in the cartel sense. I mean like he was coordinating real traffic, real money. People were able to do things outside of the strictures and confines of the state.
Mm-hmm.
It was able to be done quickly. What if there were 100 Silk Roads, you know?
Yeah, and there will be. Okay, before we let you go, just give us an update. What's next for Unsystem and Dark Wallet, and maybe give the listeners some information on where they could check out y'all's projects and support you.
We've got a piece of software we're playing around with right now, and we're letting ABC News play around with it this month, at the end of the month. Or wait, it's still February, right?
Still February.
So at the middle of March or the end of March, we'll let ABC News play with it and film it, and then we're gonna try to explosively like reveal it, you know, kind of all at one time. We've been slow on releasing like information about it, just to kind of reserve that like potential for pop. You know? So to be continued.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for everything you do. Truly an inspiration, man. Appreciate it, Cody.
I appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Another exciting edition of Sovereign BTC. This is our 4th episode. I want to thank everyone for listening. Again, you can find us on Let's Talk Bitcoin at letstalkbitcoin.com, or check out our website at SovereignBTC.com. Next week, I'll return to Central Texas, to the homeland, to my lovely wife, the Bitmom, Catherine Bleish, and my 2 lovely kiddos. And then the week after that, I'm really excited about the Texas Bitcoin Conference. It's taking place March 5th and 6th. In Austin, Texas, at the Circuit of the Americas. There's still tickets available, folks. If you go to TexasBitcoinConference.com, you can check that out. There's going to be a whole slew of people from the Bitcoin space. This event hopes to be the largest Bitcoin conference as of yet, and I really hope that you'll check it out. We'll have a booth there for Sovereign BTC and the Bitmom, and I'd love to meet you and chat with you if you're a fan of the program. Also after that, on March 9th, we're going to be doing a Bitcoin mini-conference. It's going to launch 512 Bitcoin. 512 Bitcoin will be an information clearinghouse. It's a phone number you can reach in Central Texas or all across the country. That'll link you up with different consultants and different Bitcoin firms in the ecosystem. You can also call if you want to find out where to get a burger or where to buy some books or anything in the growing Bitcoin ecosystem down in Austin, Texas. March 9th, it's going to be the 512 Bitcoin mini conference and launch party. It's going to tie in with South by Southwest. We also got a surprise in store for South by Southwest. We're going to be doing a big grassroots guerrilla marketing push to really get the word out about Bitcoin. Of course, you probably heard the Bitcoin ATM popped up in Austin. There's going to be another one in time for South by Southwest. All sorts of businesses are starting to accept Bitcoin down there in Austin. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening. We hope you can make it down for the Texas Bitcoin Conference and for the 512 Bitcoin mini conference and launch party. Well, folks, again, I'm reporting from Liberty Forum 2014. Shout out to the Free State Project. Shout out to all the great people here that helped me to feel free. And once again, I want to remind you to live free and prosper.